This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television. For animal lovers, by animal lovers.
Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and we're about to go inside the Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo. There's some incredible animals. You're watching SnakeBytes. There's always so many incredible animals at these reptile shows, but it also gives me a chance to meet all the incredible people that support me in all the things that I do. Not to mention, there's always a lot of hijinks that goes on behind the scenes. In this case, I should learn to never leave my camera on Urban Jungles Radio's table. This is what I get for doing that.
Hi, I'm Brian Barczyk. This is CRTE, and you're watching SnakeBytesTV.
I'm Brian Barczyk, and SnakeBytesTV is really aging me.
The hills are alive with the sound of Barczyk. Barczyk.
Snake species are the most represented group of reptiles in Canada. How many snake species are found in our neighbors up north? A, 18, B, 27, or C, 35? Go ahead and answer down below in the comments and check back later in the show to see if you have the right answer. For this week's Reptile Report, we'll be highlighting Dendroboard. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. There certainly are a lot of cool animals at this show, but I wanted to start it out with some lizards. And I've done a lot with leopard geckos, but another really common terrestrial gecko are fat-tailed geckos. And I'm at Geckos Etc. at Steve Sky's booth, and I tell you what, he's got some really sick mutations. This happens to be a caramel albino African fat-tailed gecko. Now this is just a simple recessive mutation that's basically a type of albino, but not the normal red and yellow albino that we normally know. But that's one gorgeous animal, and he's got a couple other really cool ones we're going to check out right now. Now the African fat-tailed geckos are a little bit more difficult to breed than the leopard geckos. For whatever reason, sometimes they're a little more territorial and they don't see the mass production of them, so these mutations aren't all the way out there. This is a pretty cool one here. This is actually called an Oriole, which is basically an axanthic, which is a recessive mutation, and you guys know that I love those silver and browns in animals. That's one cool animal too, and they really come in two kind of commonly mutations from the wild, which are striped and banded, but even the striped ones have the banding on them. So this would happen to be a striped version of an Oriole. Pretty cool. And then we're going to mix it into whiteout. So let's go take a look. All right, so I have two really cool lizards here. This happens to be a whiteout, which is basically just a really crazy pattern and color mutation that happens to be dominant. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have a super version because the super version is lethal, but this is the whiteout Oriole, which is the axanthic whiteout, which is just absolutely gorgeous. Just take a look at the blues coming through. Now that is one sick animal. And then lastly, I got to show you guys this guy right here. This is the last mutation of African fat-tailed gecko that's really cool. Now this is actually called a 0. Now remember when I talked about the naturally occurring polymorphism, you had the stripe and then the banded. Well, in a normal stripe, you're going to have banding. The zeros actually don't have any banding at all and have these kind of solid blotching on the back. So this is actually a 0. I tell you what, fat-tailed geckos have a pretty cool future, and with these base morphs starting to be bred, man, this is a sick project. You guys know whenever I see a cool hognose that's really impressive, I'm going to highlight it, and this one certainly fits that bill. This happens to be an extreme red albino superconda. Now the extreme red part is actually a polygenic trait, which just basically means you breed the best red animals to the best red animals to continue to get redder and redder babies. And of course the albino is recessive, and this is a super form of anaconda. So there's a lot of genes going on in here, but I tell you what, this is absolutely the best expression of this gene that I've ever seen. Just take a look at that beauty. Now this is certainly one of the holy grails when it comes to lizards. Just take a look at this animal. This happens to be a Fiji Island iguana. And although they look kind of similar to the green iguanas that we're used to in the States, This is as large as it gets. It just gets this size. Now, a couple things about these guys that's so cool is the fact that their main diet in the wild is actually hibiscus flowers. But in captivity, they'll typically eat all kinds of veggies mainly, with a little bit of fruits here and there, but for the most part, just a veggie diet. They made a little bit of a carnivorous diet towards the spring when it's about breeding time. But the other really cool thing is that Fiji Island iguanas only get this size. We all see the big green iguanas that get really large. This is an adult male here, and what a gorgeous animal. And unfortunately, these are Appendix 1 endangered, so we can't get any permits in the States, which kind of sucks because you can come up here and see beautiful, legal Fiji Island iguanas knowing that we can never have them. But I tell you what, it's just an honor to get to handle something as cool as this. Now, these are a really interesting boa right here. These are from North America, and they're called Rosey Boas. But this is actually an albino whitewater, which is pretty cool. It's only been around for 10 or 12 years, and you really don't see them around hardly at all. So when I get a chance to see them, I'm always really excited. Now, the Rosey Boas don't get very big. They're probably about 20 to 24 inches maximum, with males being much smaller because there's sexual dimorphism. And a large female is probably only going to have anywhere from 3 to 5 live babies. And sometimes these little guys can be a little bit cantankerous and give you a pretty good nip. And even though they've got a cute little face like this, I tell you, they pack quite a wallop for a little tiny snake. But just look at the gorgeous colors. Now, there's several species of Rosey Boa in North America, ranging all the way down into Central America. But this one is a gorgeous albino. This is a pretty rare python, and actually the first captive bred one in Canada. This is a Moluccan Scrubby python, and just take a look at these guys. Now, they're pretty similar to carpet pythons, but they get much more heavy bodied. Females can get up to 9 foot long, and they usually have a pretty nasty bite. These guys typically are called face biters, and even now at this little size, I can just feel it constricting my hands, thinking, man, I'd really like to take a pop at this guy. But the truth is, they're really gorgeous animals, and as they get larger, the iridescence just really comes out of it. I wish you guys could feel right now. It is literally just squeezing my fingers like you can't believe. And again, this is just a little tiny baby. You can only imagine when you have a 9-foot female, the strength in those animals are amazing. But it's just really cool to see such rare pythons being bred up here in Canada. All right, so there's a ton of really cool ball pythons at this show, but you guys know that I'm going to highlight a couple dark morphs because I'm into that. This happens to be a really cool one that I actually had never seen before in person. This is a black pastel GHI. Now, the GHI is a co-dominant, and so is the black pastel, and when you put them together, they just make this really dark, kind of sooty looking animal. Now, I've seen the GHI Mojaves that had the really dark like this, but I had no idea that when you bred the black pastel into them, they were going to turn out so incredibly cool looking. And then there's another kind of dark morph, but then bred into a coral glow that is just a stunner. Now, this animal absolutely smoked me. I've produced cinnamon bananas before. This happens to be a cinnamon coral glow. Now, the corals and bananas are really, really similar animals. Some people would actually say they're the same thing, but this animal is absolutely breathtaking. It's got so much purple and tyrosinase in it, it's absolutely out of control. Now, I tell you what, I've produced them before that were really pretty, but this one is 10 times better than anyone I've ever seen. And as this grows older, it's going to get a little bit of freckling in it, but that purple is just going to come out more and more. I tell you, I'm totally loving the dark morphs. And then when you add it into either coral or banana, man, now that's a ripper. Here's some pretty stunning ball pythons right here, and they're kind of new mutations that you guys may not have heard of. This is actually a cypress spider ball python. So the cypress gene is kind of similar to the bongo gene, but a little bit lighter than it, and it works really cool. And I tell you what, bred to a spider, it makes a really stunning animal. And this is one additional gene, which is what's called a honey. So it's a cypress spider honey. And just take a look at the color in this, just absolutely vibrant and really pops. What's interesting is the honey gene reacts to the bell trait, which is the leucistic trait. So when bred to a Mojave, it makes more white snakes. So these genes are really new, and we don't really know what's going on with all of them yet, but it's pretty exciting to see the kind of mutations they're making. Here's two more ball pythons that absolutely blew me away. This happens to be a leopard super stripe. Now the super stripe is a specter yellow belly, and the leopard gene is a codominant gene. So just look at the way it kind of just completely destroys and whacks out the pattern. And then this happens to be an Enchi freeway, which is a lilac, much like the super stripe, highways and pumas. But just look at the purple coming through that animal. I look at animals like this and I think 20 years ago we couldn't have imagined mutations like this when we were just bringing in maybe a ghost ball python and the occasional albino. I tell you, these ball python morphs have just absolutely come a long, long way. Now this is one of the more bizarre creatures you're going to find at any reptile show. This is an Australian knobtail gecko, but this is a Nephrus amii, and they're just one of the more cool and unusual of the knobtail geckos. These come from the inland areas and the very arid desert areas, and they're big time carnivores. These guys will eat pretty much anything that's small enough to fit in their mouth, whether it's little lizards, all kinds of bugs, or anything they can find. And one of the reasons why you don't see nearly as many amii in the pet trade is the fact that they're a little bit lower producer than the other Nephrus. They're all going to have 2 eggs, but typically these guys will only have anywhere from 4 to 8 eggs per year, whereas some of the other species could have, up to 16 or even 20 eggs, believe it or not. But certainly one of the coolest and most unusual faces that you're ever going to see. This is another really cool lizard to my buddy Brandon. He always surprised me with such cool stuff every time I come up to Canada. Now this happens to be a Yucatan spiny lizard, or a Tinosaurus defensor. Now this, believe it or not, is an adult male right here, so this is as big as they get. The females are slightly smaller, and the males have a little bit more bold pattern and a little more red coming through. Again, these guys like it hot. They want 120 plus degrees basking spot oftentimes. And what's really cool about these animals is that they're vegetarians. When you look at an animal like this, you would certainly think it would eat crickets or some sort of bug, but believe it or not, they're completely vegetarian. And of course, they get their namesake from this really cool spiny tail. What an awesome animal. Take a look at this amazing lizard right here. This is actually a Baja blue rock lizard, obviously from the Baja of Mexico. And just look at the color on this animal. The males will be a little bit brighter and a little more blue than females, so there's a little bit of sexual dimorphism, but believe it or not, the females are still extremely gorgeous. Now these guys like it hot. We're talking 120 to 140 degrees basking spot, and they're completely grease lightning. The way they basically get away from predators is to move super quick and hide in the rock crevices, and they're relatively high production animals. So although you don't see them around a lot, if you have a group of them, you're definitely going to produce babies. And I hope these make a resurgence into the market because they're one of the coolest looking lizards you're ever going to see. I met my good friend Philip Starkey from Star Pythons all the way from Germany to the Canadian show, where he brought some really cool carpet pythons. Most people would say that Philip probably has one of the coolest, if not the coolest, carpet python collection on the planet. And he brought a couple little goodies, including this one here that really caught my eye. It's a caramel zebra. Now the zebra is a codominant mutation. When bred 2 zebras together, you're going to get basically a patternless yellow snake. And then of course the caramel is also a codominant, with the super caramel being even more freckled out. And oh, look at that guy. He's a little feisty bugger, and he got me right on the wrist. But yeah, carpet pythons have great attitudes when they're young. And you gotta be careful because they like to bite. But when they get bigger, they're super tame animals. And this caramel zebra is really extremely gorgeous. Now this is one step further. This is actually a caramel zebra jaguar. Now the jaguar gene is actually codominant as well, but the super form is actually a lethal gene for a pure white carpet python. But it just adds a little bit more of the interesting color and pattern to it. They're little feisty devils. I tell you, I love the fact that carpet pythons are little guys, but just are completely wired up. Again, it's a little snake in a really big world, and this guy is absolutely awesome. This is a boa species that you rarely see at most shows, so when I saw it, I had to highlight it for you guys. These are actually Bolivian boas, or boa constrictor amarilli, and it's probably been a good 10 years since I've really seen any available. Now what's interesting about these guys is most of the red-tailed boas have that really long red tail. These guys just have it basically host of the anal vent, which is kind of interesting. And I remember the first captive bred animals in the US probably about 20 years ago. It was quite a feat. They always have this kind of more silvery back, and they always have the saddles that have these little widow peaks in them. They're definitely a really cool boa species. Now this is one wicked boa here. I'm at my buddy at Slimebeard's Exotics. I highlighted a few of his animals last year, and we're back again for another one. Now this happens to be an IMG, which is basically an increasing melanin gene is what it was named after. It's a codominant mutation, and you can see all the black that comes out. Just look at how black the sides are. And as it gets older, it gets more and more dark. Some of the adults on these guys are pretty much solid black. That's one cool snake. I actually highlighted this animal last year as a baby, and now that it's gotten bigger, it's just even that much more cool. This is a snow paradoxboa, and there's a few things about this animal that just absolutely blow me away. The first thing is when the tongue comes out, believe it or not, it has black freckling on the tongue itself. And then the other super cool thing is the right eye has a black eye and the left eye has a red eye. I mean, this thing is cool, not to mention all of the black coming on down. Now the snow is of course an aneurystic albino, and the paradoxing may or may not be genetic. So far we haven't really proved it out. Most people think it's a random mutation. Other people think that you can actually breed it out. Regardless of whether it's genetic or not, this is one really cool snake. This is an emerald tree boa, or a baby Corollus caninus. This was one of the snakes that really got me interested in snakes. I was probably about 4 years old when I saw the picture of the first baby emerald tree boa that I've ever seen. And I remember throughout my entire childhood just being mesmerized about how beautiful these animals are. Now what's really cool about the emerald tree boas is that they're born red just like this, and that's mainly because they're going to be in part of the canopy that has flowers, and they're going to hide right in those red flowering. As they get older, they turn more green and they move up the canopy into the more leafy areas. Now this is just a cool animal. And the real sad thing is, although I've been just a complete emerald tree boa addict, I've actually never owned one, which is just really weird. It's one of those snakes that I've always dreamed about, but just never had the opportunity to get one. So just holding one is just so awesome to me. Now that is one cute animal. Well, I'm trying to make a new little friend here. This is an ornate Nile monitor lizard. His name is Charlie, and you can see he's starting to put up with me handling him a little bit. He's not quite as happy as I'd like him to be. And trust me, he's at that size where if he got a hold of me, it would definitely hurt a little bit. You can see I'm leaking a little bit from just kind of holding on to him, but he's starting to calm down. Monitor lizards are extremely intelligent animals, and you have to kind of gain their trust, to be honest with you. When you grab them too much, they don't like it at all. So I'm trying to just gently hold on to them and let them gain my trust a little bit. Now, Nile monitors can get pretty large, you know, 5 to 8 foot in length, and typically they have pretty cantankerous attitudes. But as you can see, Charlie is starting to kind of calm down a little bit. And with some work, this guy might make a pretty cool pet. But again, that's a beautiful animal. I don't know about you guys, but I tell you what, there was some amazing animals in here, and I shed a little bit of blood, but it was totally worth it to handle Charlie. This was a fantastic time. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Snake species are the most represented group of reptiles in Canada. How many snake species are found in our neighbors up north? If you said C, 35, you're 100% correct. Good job. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. There were some incredible animals and some really incredible people. And if you want to follow any of my adventure, I'm always Facebooking and tweeting my way through it. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.
Hi, I'm Peter Birch, an Aussie bloke who loves wildlife. My respect for nature started when I was a young boy in rural New South Wales. Since then, it's exploded into an obsession. New episodes every Thursday, only on AnimalBytesTV.